in the bustling heart of Lagos, a city that never apologized for its cruelty. Ambition glittered like gold in the sun, while betrayal hid comfortably behind polished smiles and respectful greetings. It was a city where men learned early that survival was louder than morality, and silence was often mistaken for weakness. That was where Bayo lived. At 32, Bayo was not the kind of man the city noticed. He did not announce himself. He did not dominate conversations or command attention. If you passed him on the street, you would forget his face within minutes. Average height, modest build, eyes always lowered as if studying the ground for lessons others missed. Yet beneath that quiet exterior lived a man shaped by struggle. Every weekday before dawn, while the city still stretched itself awake, Bayo joined the endless migration of workers pouring into Lagos like a human tide. The morning air was thick, humid, restless, already impatient. Danfo conductors screamed destinations with hoarse voices that sounded more like warnings than invitations. CMS, CMS, Oshodi, Yaba Strait. Horns blared endlessly, competing for dominance in the chaos. Hawkers banged on bus windows with desperate urgency, selling hope disguised as sachet water and bread. Bayo clutched his worn leather briefcase tightly, holding it against his chest as if it contained something fragile. Inside were files, receipts, reports, but more than that, it held responsibility. Expectation. Survival. Every morning he boarded the same bus, sat in the same corner, watched the same buildings slide past. He rarely slept. He thought. Because Bayo had come too far to fail. He was born in Ibadan in a small house that smelled of kerosene, sweat, and quiet perseverance. His childhood was not marked by abundance but by discipline. His father died early, too early, leaving behind silence, unpaid debts, and a woman who suddenly had to become everything. His mother sold goods in the market. Some days were good. Many were not. For children depended on her tired hands. Food was measured. School fees were delayed. Dreams were postponed. Yet she never complained. Instead she prayed. When Bayo became the first in his family to earn a university degree, the day felt unreal, like a borrowed miracle. In the crowded graduation hall, surrounded by proud parents and expensive cameras, his mother wept openly. She held onto his shirt as though afraid the moment might evaporate if she let go. Her hands trembled as she whispered prayers into his chest, prayers soaked in years of hunger, patience, and sacrifice. "Don't forget who you are," she told him. "Don't let the city swallow you." That degree carried Bayo into Lexus Build Limited, a towering symbol of success in Nigeria's construction industry. Glass walls, shiny floors, offices that smelled of power and money. To many it was just employment. To Bayo it was redemption. As an administrative officer he became known quietly, not for brilliance but for reliability. He double-checked figures, filed documents properly, stayed back long after others had gone home. When colleagues laughed and left early, Bayo remained. Night after night, he sat alone beneath the glow of a single desk lamp, typing reports while the city outside slept. Security guards nodded at him with familiarity. Cleaners greeted him with respect. Diligence was not ambition to Bayo. It was gratitude. His boss, Mr. Ezekiel, was everything Bayo was not. Tall, loud, commanding. Always dressed in sharp suits that announced authority before he spoke. Ezekiel Adden walked like a man accustomed to obedience. His laughter filled rooms. His silence frightened people. He had friends in powerful places. Politicians, bankers, men whose names did not need introductions. In meetings, Ezekiel often placed a heavy hand on Bayo's shoulder. "This one," he would say proudly, "is my right hand." A man of integrity. Bayo always smiled politely. He did not see the hunger behind the praise. The greed sharpened by years of unchecked power. Outside the office, Bayo's world was smaller, but warmer. A modest apartment in Surulere. A loving wife named Mariam. 2 children, To-be and Sade, who believed their father could fix broken toys and broken days. Their home was rarely quiet. Cartoons blared from the television. Plates clattered during dinner. Laughter echoed through narrow rooms that held more love than furniture. On weekends, Bayo took his children to Lekki Beach, buying them cheap fan ice, watching them run barefoot toward waves they were not afraid of. At night, Mariam stirred jollof rice on the stove while an old radio played softly in the background. Sometimes Fela. sometimes static. Always peace. Money was never enough. But love made it bearable. Bayo sent nearly half his salary to support Miriam's parents and siblings. When she worried, he only smiled. Marriage means carrying each other's burdens, he said. When Miriam complained about his late nights at work, he kissed her forehead gently. It's for our future, he promised. She believed him. So did he. Neither of them knew that somewhere, behind glass walls and locked doors, a decision was being made. One that would soon erase everything Bayo believed he had built. If Bayo was shaped by restraint, Mr. Ezekiel Adden was shaped by excess. From the moment Ezekiel entered any room, he demanded attention, not politely, not patiently, but with the certainty of a man who believed the world owed him recognition. His voice was loud, his laughter louder, his confidence absolute. He dressed like someone who expected respect before he earned it. Tailored suits, polished shoes, wristwatch heavy enough to remind others of its cost. At Lexus Build Limited, Ezekiel was more than a boss. He was a presence. People adjusted their posture when he walked past. Conversations lowered automatically. Assistants rushed. Subordinates smiled too quickly. Ezekiel enjoyed it. Power had always come easily to him. He knew which hands to shake, which pockets to fill, which doors to push open without knocking. Politicians returned his calls. Bankers laughed at his jokes. Contractors waited anxiously for his approval. To the outside world he was success personified. To Bayo he was simply Oga. Every morning Ezekiel arrived late, never apologetic. He swept through the office with dramatic flair, greeting some, ignoring others, always aware of who was watching. And almost without fail, his eyes landed on Bayo. My right hand, Ezekiel would announce, clapping him on the back hard enough to sting. How is my most trusted man today? Bayo always answered respectfully. I'm well, sir. Ezekiel praised him often, in meetings, in corridors, in front of visitors. He spoke of Bayo's honesty as if it were a personal achievement. This one cannot steal, he once said jokingly. Even if money was crying in front of him. Laughter followed. Bayo smiled, uncomfortable but grateful. What he did not know was that Ezekiel's praise was never admiration. It was camouflage. Because men like Ezekiel did not trust honesty, they used it. Behind closed doors, the man who smiled so freely became calculating. His office, spacious and cold, was where deals were struck in whispers. Files disappeared. Numbers shifted. Accounts moved. And always Ezekiel wanted more. Lexus Build had grown massive, but appetite grows faster than wealth. Contracts were no longer enough. Ezekiel needed private accounts, silent transfers, money that answered only to him. But there was a problem. Every system needed a name. Every transaction needed a trail. And Ezekiel was far too smart to leave his own. That was when he began to watch Bayo more closely. He noticed how late Bayo stayed. How trusted he was by security. How invisible he seemed to management above Ezekiel. How no one ever questioned his integrity. A clean man. A quiet man. A perfect shadow. Ezekiel began testing boundaries. He asked Bayo to stay back more often. To help with sensitive files. To log into systems late at night when things were quieter. He framed it as trust. As loyalty. This one, I trust you more than myself, Ezekiel said once, smiling warmly. Bayo felt honored. He did not hear the warning beneath the compliment. At home, life continued gently. Miriam noticed Bayo's exhaustion. The deeper lines beneath his eyes. The way he sometimes stared into space during dinner. You're working too hard, she said one night, placing food in front of him. He smiled tiredly. It will pay off. I promise. She wanted to believe him. She needed to. Toby and Sade slept peacefully that night, unaware that their father's name was slowly being sharpened into a weapon. Because greed is patient. And Ezekiel had already chosen his sacrifice. There are moments when lives change so quietly that no one notices until it is too late. For Bayo, that moment arrived on a night that looked like every other. It was a Friday in June 2019. Rain fell softly over Suralire, tapping against zinc roofs and window panes like a lullaby. The city, exhausted from its own noise, surrendered to sleep. Inside their modest apartment, warmth lingered. Miriam had already tucked Toby and Sade into bed, whispering prayers over their small heads. Bayo lay beside her, his breathing slow, his body heavy with honest fatigue. His briefcase sat by the door untouched. His phone lay silent on the table. For the first time in weeks he slept without dreams. Across the city, Lagos was also quiet, but not asleep. At Lexus Build Limited, the lights on the top floor glowed against the darkness. The building stood empty, polished, alert, like a predator waiting. Inside his office, Mr. Ezekiel Adden sat alone. He had dismissed the security guard early. Claimed he needed privacy. The kind of privacy money demanded. Ezekiel removed his jacket carefully, folded it, and placed it on the chair. He loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves. This was work, but a different kind. He powered on a computer. Not his. Bayo's. The password was easy. Ezekiel had watched Bayo type it dozens of times. Trust made people careless. The system welcomed him without question. Ezekiel smiled. He moved with precision, no rush, no hesitation. Each click was deliberate. Each number calculated. He accessed accounts hidden behind layers of authorization. Accounts that only a few people knew existed. One transfer. Then another. Then another. Millions of naira moved silently through the night, flowing like blood through unseen veins. The numbers blinked on the screen, obedient. Ezekiel paused only once, leaning back in Bayo's chair, resting his head against the leather. He imagined the aftermath, the shock, the denial, the confusion, and he laughed softly. When he finished, he erased what needed erasing. Logs adjusted. Time stamps manipulated. Trails rerouted. By the time dawn approached, every digital footprint led neatly to one name. Bayo Aderemi. Satisfied, Ezekiel shut down the system. He restored the office to its usual perfection. He straightened Bayo's desk. Even aligned the pen. Then he took one last look at the screen. "Thank you," he murmured. At the same moment, Bayo turned in his sleep. Miriam shifted closer to him, unaware that the future she trusted was being dismantled, quietly, efficiently, by a man who smiled too much. When morning came, Lagos would wake to noise, traffic, shouting, routine. And Bayo would wake to a life already destroyed. The weekend was view once. Monday arrived without mercy. The morning air in Lagos was sharp, restless, impatient. Traffic snarled early, horns screaming frustration into the gray sky. People rushed, complained, cursed the day, unaware that for Bayo time itself was about to fracture. He woke before his alarm. Miriam was already up, tying her headscarf, moving quietly so as not to wake the children. The smell of tea filled the small kitchen. Everything felt normal. Comfortingly so. Bayo dressed carefully as he always did. Ironed shirt. Polished shoes. He kissed Miriam's forehead, then bent to kiss Tabi and Sade as they slept. "Daddy is going to work," he whispered. They did not stir. He picked up his briefcase and stepped into the city. By the time he reached Lexus Build Limited, something felt wrong. The security guards did not greet him with their usual familiarity. Conversation stopped abruptly as he passed. Heads bent together. Eyes followed him, quick glances, then away. Bayo told himself it was nothing. Inside the office, tension thickened the air. Computers were shut down. Phones rang endlessly. Managers moved hurriedly between rooms. Then the call came. "Bayo," a voice said sharply. "Come to the conference room. Now." His heart began to pound. The room was full, executives, auditors, faces tight with suspicion. At the head of the table sat Mr. Ezekiel Adden, calm, composed, concern etched perfectly across his face. "Please sit," Ezekiel said gently. Before Bayo could ask a question, the door opened. Police officers entered. The sound of boots on polished floor echoed too loudly. One of them stepped forward. "Bayo Aderemi," the officer said. "You are under arrest for financial fraud." The words did not make sense. I don't understand," Bayo stammered. "There must be a mistake." No one answered him. Cold metal closed around his wrists. "Handcuffs." Gasps filled the room. Whispers followed instantly, spreading like fire. "I trusted you," he said softly. Bayo searched his face, desperate for recognition, for truth. He found none. They walked him out of the building in full view of colleagues. People he had helped. People who had borrowed money from him. People who had eaten from his kindness. No one spoke. By afternoon, the story had escaped the building. By evening, it owned the city. Newspapers screamed. Office thief steals millions. Neighbors avoided Miriam. Doors closed. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. At school, whispers followed to be and Sade like shadows. At home, Miriam stared at the television, then at the door, then at the floor. When Bayo finally returned, under police escort, his home felt unfamiliar. "Tell me this isn't true," she whispered. He dropped to his knees. "I swear to you," he said, tears streaming, voice breaking. "I did nothing." But doubt had already entered the room. And doubt does not leave easily. That night, as Bayo lay awake on a thin mattress in a cell, listening to unfamiliar sounds and distant cries, Lagos continued to live, eat, laugh, argue. The city had moved on. Bayo had not. The gates of Kirikiri maximum security prison did not open, they swallowed. Bayo felt it the moment he stepped inside. The air was heavier, damp with sweat, rust, and despair. The sounds were wrong. Metal clanging, men shouting, laughter that carried no joy. Even daylight seemed afraid to enter fully. His name was stripped first. He became a number. His clothes were taken. His belt. His dignity. He was issued a faded uniform that smelled of old fear and older men. When the cell door shut behind him, the sound echoed like a verdict being repeated. That first night broke something inside him. The floor was cold concrete, wet in places he did not want to think about. Bodies lay close together, strangers breathing in rhythm. Somewhere nearby, a man screamed, a long animal sound that ended suddenly. Bayo pressed his back against the wall and hugged his knees. He did not sleep. Eyes watched him in the darkness. Measuring. Calculating. In Kirikiri, weakness announced itself loudly. Days blurred into one another. Morning roll calls. Thin meals. Endless waiting. Weeks melted into months without shape or mercy. The man he had been, the careful worker, the loving father, the obedient citizen, felt distant, unreal. Visitors came at first. Miriam sat across from him behind thick glass, her face drawn tight with exhaustion. She did not hold the phone immediately. "They are saying terrible things," she finally said. "Everyone believes them." Bayo swallowed hard. "I know," he said. "But I didn't do this. I swear." She searched his eyes as if hoping to catch a lie. When she found none, it did not comfort her. Doubt had already planted itself deep. "You were always at work," she said quietly. "Always staying late." "Because I was trying to provide," he replied, voice cracking. "For you. For to be in Sade." Silence stretched between them. With each visit, Miriam grew more distant. The pauses longer. The questions sharper. Love began to feel like an interrogation. Then the visits slowed. Then they stopped. One afternoon, a guard leaned casually against the bars. "Your mama don die," he said as if announcing a change in weather. Bayo stared at him, uncomprehending. "What?" he whispered. "Burial don happen already." The words hit like a physical blow. Bayo screamed. He beat his fists against the wall until his knuckles split. He collapsed onto the floor, sobbing into concrete that offered no comfort. The woman who prayed him into manhood, gone. He begged for permission to attend the burial. It was denied. That night, something inside him hardened. Not anger. Not hatred. Resolve. If the world had decided he was nothing, then he would rebuild himself from nothing. And in the darkness of Kirikiri, where hope went to die, Bayo began to change. Survival in Kirikiri followed its own brutal rules. Strength mattered. Reputation mattered more. Silence could protect you or get you killed. For months, Bayo kept to himself, speaking only when necessary, observing everything. He learned quickly which corners to avoid, which faces signaled danger, which laughter was a warning. But pain has a way of sharpening the mind. After his mother's burial passed without him, grief no longer felt like a wound, it became fuel. Nights were the worst. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by memories of prayers whispered into his chest, of promises he could not keep. One afternoon, while avoiding the heat, Bayo wandered into a neglected room at the far end of the block. The prison library. It was barely worthy of the name. Torn books lay stacked unevenly. Pages were missing. Covers were gone. Dust coated everything. It smelled of abandonment. But to Bayo it felt like oxygen. He picked up a book on Nigerian law. The language was difficult, dense, unfriendly. He read slowly. Painfully. often rereading the same paragraph until it made sense. Every day he returned. Other inmates noticed. At first they mocked him. "Book man," they laughed. "You think book go free you?" Bayo did not answer. Weeks passed. Months. One evening an inmate approached him quietly. A tall man with tired eyes. "I hear say you sabi read," the man said. "Help me write letter." Bayo hesitated, then nodded. He helped him draft a petition. Simple, clear, respectful. The man left grateful. Then another came. And another. Appeals. Complaints. Letters to lawyers who never replied. Word spread. They began to call him Baba Lawyer. With a name came respect. Men who once stared now nodded. Younger inmates offered him space. Trouble avoided him. In Kirikiri, knowledge became armor. At night, lying on his thin mattress, Bayo whispered to himself, "One day, the truth will come out." Outside those walls, time kept moving. Miriam struggled alone. Bills mounted. Shame followed her everywhere. Neighbors whispered. Friends disappeared. Eventually, survival demanded a choice. She chose to move on. Bayo did not know yet. Inside Kirikiri, he continued to learn. He studied case files. Learned how evidence was twisted. How poor men were crushed by systems designed to protect the powerful. The injustice enraged him, but it also clarified something. His suffering was not unique. And if he ever walked free, he would not walk alone. The city had buried him. But Bayo was no longer the same man it had condemned. Time did not stop for Bayo. It never does for the forgotten. Inside Kirikiri, days lost their names. They became numbers scratched into walls, meals remembered only by taste, nights measured by screams and silence. Bayo aged quietly. His hair thinned. His shoulders hardened. His eyes changed, less hopeful, more alert. Years passed. Outside the prison walls, Lagos thrived. New roads were built. New towers rose. Old scandals faded, replaced by louder ones. Bayo's name disappeared from headlines, then from memory. But not from Mr. Ezekiel Aden's life. Ezekiel flourished. He moved into larger mansions. Threw louder parties. Laughed more freely. Lexus Build Limited expanded, contracts multiplying like proof of innocence. Whenever Bayo's name crossed his mind, which was rare, Ezekiel dismissed it easily. Some people were born to lose. Back in Kirikiri, Baba Lawyer became essential. Inmates lined up quietly, waiting for him to read court papers they could not understand. He learned how to listen without judgment, how to offer hope without lying. Sometimes he won small victories, reduced sentences, postponed hearings. Sometimes he failed. But every effort mattered. Then one afternoon a guard called his name. Visitor. Visitors were rare now. Bayo followed the guard through long corridors, his heart pounding, not with hope, but caution. Hope had disappointed him too many times. When he entered the visiting room, he saw a young woman sitting alone. She looked out of place. Neatly dressed. Clear eyes. A notebook resting on her lap. She stood when she saw him. "My name is Tumi Ade," she said. "I'm a journalist." Bayo stiffened. "I don't give interviews," he said flatly. She did not argue. "I know," she said softly. "I just want to listen." Something about her tone, calm, patient, made him pause. She asked simple questions. About his work. His arrest. The accounts. The timestamps. As she flipped through her notes, her brow furrowed. "These records, they don't add up," she murmured. Bayo laughed bitterly. "Nothing added up when they destroyed me," he replied. She looked at him, then really looked at him. "I believe you," she said. The words hit him harder than any blow. For the first time in years, hope did not feel dangerous. Outside, clouds gathered over Lagos. Somewhere, Ezekiel Aden slept peacefully. He did not yet know that his silence was about to be questioned. The arrival of Tumi Ade changed everything. She was relentless. Quietly relentless, the type of person who could ask the same question a dozen times without frustration, who could stare at numbers until they spoke, and who refused to leave until she understood the truth. Bayo, now Baba Lawyer, had grown cautious. Years in Kirikiri had taught him the danger of trust. But something about Tumi's presence, the way she refused to look away, stirred a spark he thought had died. She returned every week. Each visit she brought more files, more evidence, more inconsistencies. "There are hidden accounts," she said one day, sliding a folder across the table. Transactions rerouted. Timestamps falsified. Everything points to Bayo, but I don't think it's you. Bayo stared at her, heart pounding. The possibility that someone else had orchestrated his downfall felt like air after drowning. I've seen men destroy others for sport, he said softly. I know the type. But, it's been years. Why now? Toomey looked him squarely in the eyes. Because some people get careless. And some mistakes leave trails they think no one will find. Outside, the city moved as always, oblivious, impatient, indifferent. But inside the prison walls, a plan began to form. Toomey's investigation was slow, meticulous. She visited former employees, cross-checked old accounts, interviewed whistleblowers who had feared Ezekiel for years. Every visit brought her closer to the truth. Ezekiel, meanwhile, began to feel the first stirrings of unease. He noticed conversations cut short when he entered rooms. Subordinates avoided his gaze. His friends no longer laughed as freely. One careless evening, he spoke too loudly in a private meeting, boasting about how he had handled Bayo's downfall. The conversation was recorded, unbeknownst to him. When Toomey received the recording, she smiled faintly. Patience, she whispered to Bayo. It's coming. When Ezekiel found out, he tried to silence her but failed them. He tried to silence Bayo, but Baba lawyer won't lose the second time. Guards refused to take his bribe, even inmates rejected him. And Bayo, lying on the thin mattress that had become his bed for years, finally allowed himself to believe, if only slightly, that justice had not abandoned him completely. But even as hope returned, a shadow lingered. Because in Lagos, revenge is patient. And not everyone who smiles is your friend. December 12, 2024, arrived like a storm over Lagos. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. People whispered, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of Bayo Aderemi, now sitting taller, steadier after years of suffering. He had survived Kirikiri maximum security prison, had fought despair, and had learned patience in the hardest way possible. Beside him sat Toomey Ade, notebook closed, eyes unwavering. She had been the one to refuse to look away when everyone else had abandoned him. She had believed him when the world had condemned him. Their partnership, first professional then deeply personal, had grown through shared struggle. Long weeks reviewing files, interviews with terrified whistleblowers, cross-checking falsified bank accounts, and navigating threats from Ezekiel Aden. Trust had been forged in fire, and slowly friendship had deepened into something far more intimate. Across the room, Mr. Ezekiel Aden sat rigid. His perfectly pressed suits no longer hid the cracks in his carefully constructed life. Subordinates avoided his gaze. Allies whispered nervously. Power, he realized too late, could not shield a guilty conscience forever. The judge rose. Silence swallowed the room. In the matter of the state versus Bayo Aderemi, after reviewing all evidence and testimonies, the court finds the defendant. Bayo's heart raced. 5 years of lost time, injustice, and loneliness weighed on him. Innocent. A breath held for years finally released. Bayo sank to his knees, tears streaming. 5 stolen years of his life. His freedom, his mother's funeral, his children's upbringing, crashed down in a single moment. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed and the city erupted. Justice had finally spoken. Ezekiel Aden was arrested for fraud. His empire crumbled in public. The man who had orchestrated Bayo's downfall could no longer hide behind charm or wealth. Bayo rose slowly, the reality sinking in. The world outside had changed. Miriam, his first wife, had remarried during his imprisonment. She had faced years of shame, fear, and uncertainty, and Bayo understood. She had made choices to protect herself and the children. He did not hate her. He forgave her. His children, to-be and Sade, now older, barely recognized him. 5 years of absence had rewritten their memories of a father who had been taken from them. Bayo understood their hesitation. Trust and love would have to be rebuilt, patiently, moment by moment. As he adjusted to the world he had lost and regained, Toomey Ade remained by his side. Their bond had grown quietly but intensely through months of struggle. Late-night discussions over files, reviewing bank statements, strategizing legal moves, and comforting each other through threats from Ezekiel. Friendship had blossomed into trust and trust into love. She had been his anchor in a world that had tried to erase him, and now she was his partner in rebuilding a life he never imagined he would reclaim. They married quietly months later by the sea, with only the waves as witnesses. Their twin babies soon followed, laughter filling a home that had once been hollowed by injustice. Even as life returned, shadows lingered. One evening an envelope arrived at their doorstep. No return address. Inside, a photograph of Ezekiel Adden, smiling, free. Beneath it, a single line. Truth doesn't always win. Ask your children. Bayo's hands shook. Even after victory, he realized that some battles leave scars that never fully heal. Some dangers are patient. And some prisons, those built of fear and power, cannot be fully dismantled even by truth. He hugged his twins tightly. He looked at Tumi and drew strength from her calm presence. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Because in Lagos, even when the world tries to bury truth, light finds cracks, and hope refuses to die.